When I first came to Sierra Leone in 2007, my plan was just to stay for a year. But after 4 years of being here, yes, I'd done some really cool stuff. I'd started the Vicky Remote Show. I had co-founded a fashion company, Ashobi Designs. I'd worked for a tech startup, Access Point Africa. And I was like on the scene, I was known. But, at the time, there was still only one TV station in Sierra Leone. Internet penetration was maybe like 1%. BlackBerry, like after 4 years of being here, BlackBerry was just like on the scene and very few people even had access to that. Being in my 20s and knowing that I had my entire future ahead of me, I knew that if I stayed in Sierra Leone, yes, I could get really, really popular, but I wasn't sure if I would be able to grow. So I left and I went back to the US and I did my master's in broadcast journalism in Columbia. And then after that, it was like, okay, am I going to stay in New York? Am I going to be here? I remember I had an interview with TMZ. They were looking for like a producer and I took the bus, I had an interview. And I took a bus and I was on my way downtown. And I was just sitting there thinking like, do I really want to be producing entertainment news about like celebrities and celebrity gossip? Like, is that my dream? I never showed up for the interview, actually. I didn't even call to make an excuse. I just didn't show up. I got off the bus somewhere by Central Park and I was just like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna move back to Africa. But I knew I couldn't come back to Sierra Leone because I just left Sierra Leone and I knew what the media landscape was. So my mom was living in Ghana at the time, and I had been doing a couple, the Africa business circuit. So the previous year I'd spoken at Wharton Business Conference and I'd spoken at Harvard that year. And then I got invited to the New York Africa Forum, which was held in Gabon that year. And so there was all this story around about Africa rising and, there's something going on. So I decided that I wasn't going to stay in New York. I was going to move back to the continent. I was going to move either to Nigeria or to Ghana. I had some friends who were working for TEF at the time that I'd met at a couple of those conferences. I was like, let me go check out Lagos. This is in 2012. So I went to Lagos and I was like, I'm not go able. Nigeria is too much. Lagos was too much for me. I felt it. I had such a good time. I knew I could not live in Lagos. So I decided I was going to move to Ghana, which was, I've been to Ghana several times before. My mom was already living there. And so, so I decided I was going to move to Ghana. And I wanted to get into TV in Ghana. But of course, I don't speak Twi. I'm not Ghanaian. I have no network. So I decided, I do have experience in marketing. I do have experience in comms. I do love social media. I am on the internet all the time. It started coming to me that maybe I could put all of those skills together and look for work. I wasn't necessarily sure what the nature of that work would be, but I was open to putting myself out there. So then, of course, I went to start where I knew I understood the language. I started a TV station. There was a TV station in Ghana called Metro TV. So I had a friend who was in banking who knew either the deputy at Metro TV or something like that. They had done business before and got me an appointment. So I took my Vicky Remote Show reel and my CV and I went to Metro TV to look for a job as a producer. Got to Metro TV and, spoke. The man I spoke to was really kind and was, entertained me and basically was if I was really interested. They don't really hire producers in that way to produce stories. but he'd keep my CV. So he kept my CV, and he said he'd invite me for like a production they were doing the following weekend. It never happened because Atta Mills died. And so that never panned out. But we stayed in touch. And then randomly one day he texted me and said, he actually has a friend who owns a company. He wouldn't say what the company was. And he said, the friend is looking for someone like me, someone with my skill sets. And if I was willing to meet him like in a couple days, he would drive me to the person's place of business. He wouldn't say who the person was. He wouldn't say what the company was. Like, no information whatsoever. And he was like, if I was interested. I was like, sure. I was looking for opportunities. So he drove me to Printex Road. And it ended up being this textile company called Printex. And I met the owner. And yeah, he was like, he's looking for someone to help guide branding and marketing and just like, support with new ideas to revive Printex in the textile market. And I was like, well, I can do that. My best friend and I just did a fashion company in Sierra Leone. I love fashion. And a couple years before, I'd been involved in a startup that was about fashion. Was called like africafashion.net or fashionafrica.net, sorry, which two Sierra Leonean brothers were trying to put together. And it hadn't panned out. But during that, I'd done some preliminary work where I'd been in contact with lots of African designers, trying to create some kind of database of them so that this company, fashionafrica.net, would go on and like wholesale and retail their products. So I had some kind of knowledge, both as co-founding Ashby Designs and fashionafrica.net, that I felt like I could put some to use. And he was like, what are your terms? And I was just like, I could ask for what I really want and scare him off potentially, or I could like maybe be really small and not scare him off, like just ask for something small so that he would say yes. I decided to ask for what I really needed and thought that if he says, what's the worst that can happen? We'll just say no. So I'm like, this is what I want as a salary, as a consultant. I need you to pay for a graphic designer on retainer. And I also need you to pay for a personal assistant on retainer because I'm new to Ghana. I'm going to need people to support the work that I was doing. And he was like, sure. And that's how I got like my first big break, my first like consulting gig in Ghana. And sometimes I think it was just luck, but I also think that it was more so luck that I created for myself. Had I not gone to that TV station, had I not showed up, that man at the TV station wouldn't have known me, wouldn't have met me, wouldn't have known what I could do to then recommend me. And that's a big part of who I am in general. I like to put myself out there because you never know. So I got that opportunity and then I was like, okay, now I have my first client. I need a company. So I registered my company. This was like December 2012. Registered my company in Ghana, Vicky Ramon Company, as a media company. And all my registration stuff came through. And, by January, my company was fully incorporated in Ghana. And truly, I had some experience, but I had no experience. I mean, I'd never really worked in the African fashion or textile industry in that way at that scale. Sierra Leone is a country of 7 to 8 million. Ghana is like 25, 30 million. The economy is 4 or 5, how many ever more times. Sierra Leone's economy is small. Where we're talking about like maybe 70 billion Ghanaian economy. Sierra Leone economy is like 4 billion. So, and also city-wise, Freetown, where I'd worked for 4 years, Freetown is geographically, in terms of size, is a very small place. I can go from one side of town to the other side of town just like that. Accra is this sprawling metropolis that I didn't know, that I hadn't grown up in, that I was unfamiliar with. I also hadn't gone to school in Ghana One thing about Ghanaians that's for sure and a fact, and you can quote me anywhere, is that all of their social networks, the ones that people grew up to, everything starts in high school. If you go to high school in Ghana, you're set because you know everybody, right? I didn't go to school in Ghana. I hadn't gone to university there. I hadn't worked there. I literally had no network, I had no people. I knew friends that I had made years visiting from the creative scene, musicians, photographers, and artists, but I had no bandwidth in terms of business relations. But I decided to give my all to this one client who had taken a chance on me. So in those early years, I was mostly concerned with service delivery. Everything had to be done perfectly on time. I wanted to make sure that this person who had entrusted me with their business and their brand could rest easy knowing that it was in good hands. So I woke up every single day. I went to the African Regions Hotel, which I made my office because I didn't have physical space. So I just basically went to this hotel lobby and I said, this is my office now. Whether they like it or not, I am here. And for those first 2 years, if you walked into the lobby of the African Region Hotel, I was there in the back by the kitchen, behind the bar. I just took up space. Eventually, everybody there knew me. The chef knew me, the manager knew me, the owner-chief knew me. I was a permanent fixture at the African Regions. People would be saying oh, we need to have a meeting. I'm like, yes, come to my office. They actually thought I had real office space. I'm like, no, it's just the corner. And then after a while, they would reserve the table for me. Me and African Region were so cool. At some point, I starred in their TV commercial. They're my people. But what was so great about it is that for not being from Ghana, not having the network, and I felt welcomed. I felt like they allowed me to just be. I don't know a lot of places where some random bald-headed, was bald at the time, some bald-headed chick would just come and just be there every single day. But yeah, they allowed me and they made me feel welcome and comfortable. I would have meetings there. When I had staff, that's where the staff would meet. When I had contractors, that's where we would meet. Everybody just knew me and knew that I was at the African Region Hotel. In my first year, those first years, I went through a lot of personal assistance. A lot. Maybe 12 to 16. Because I have this thing about, I think I read it in a book about how if you want to take a journey, that before you move the car, you have to make sure you have the right people on the bus. Otherwise, it start, stop. So in those early years, I was anybody I hire, as soon as I get a sense that they're not the kind of person that I'm looking for, if they're lying, if they're unreliable, if the skill sets they say they have, they don't have, I'm gonna let them go, right? And so I let go of a lot of people really quickly. So there's lots of turnover. And I think a huge part of that also is that this culture of personal assistance is relatively new. It's not like a secretary, which I think people sometimes think it is. It's not. To assist also, it means you have to take responsibility and you have to be ahead. And it was really hard to find the kinds of people who had enough experience, both in the media and in marketing, to be able to support and assist what I was doing. So finding the right people was a challenge in those early years. But I definitely didn't stick with people who didn't work because I felt like they were going to limit my growth and also compromise the quality of what I was doing. Went through that, and after a while, the caliber of people also got better because I think I also started learning how to search better for who I needed. Initially when I would talk about, I need a personal assistant, I would say it's not a lot of work, I just need someone to help me with this and this and that. But then I flipped it where I came up with this JD that was like basically the assistant. I'm looking for someone who knows they're going to suffer, who knows they're going to struggle. Like, this is the hardest job you will ever have. Like, I didn't sell it as a great job. I sold it like this job from hell, but you get paid well. And so that helped me attract a better quality set of people to work with me. And I wouldn't say my company, it didn't grow very fast in those first I would say 4 to 5 years. But we were consistent because I had this really, really big client, right? So when I took over at Printex, one of the things I encouraged them to do was to actually go into direct sales. You know, prior to my getting there, they had worked solely as a wholesaler through the distribution channel at Makola and other wholesale buyers across the country. But when I came to Printex, I was like, you know, we could do retail and really control the consumer experience. So in the 5 years I was there, I launched 3 stores. One in Osu, one in Airport, and the last one we did was in Bangladeshi in East Legon. And, you know, so then I had like so in addition to like marketing, I had to kind of like handle, first of all, like find the location, refurb, launch the shop, create the customer experience, train the retail staff, monitor inventory, you know, get into textile design, oversee production. So I really got a great opportunity to learn like 360 from like design, production and manufacturing to marketing and branding and kind of selling the brand, doing advertising campaigns like 360 from TV, radio, outdoor. I did like 3 billboard campaigns a year. And then handling sales at the store, display, and just really like going through the entire gamut. Like, this is how business works. So in those like first years, I knew that I wouldn't grow unless I had the right people. And so I went through a lot of people because I didn't want to work with anyone who I had to micromanage. I'm more of a like, okay, I'll teach you. But then I need you to like ride with it, right? I need you to add value. So a lot of people didn't last. But eventually I learned that at least in this market, right, in West Africa, for the kind of work that I do, for media, for marketing, it wasn't so important that people had degrees. It wasn't important that they had been to or this or how they speak. And, you know, sometimes it's very easy to get taken up by people's outward experience and how they look on paper. But I found that like what's really, really important for building a team is someone's attitude to work and their willingness to learn. You can change that over time, but as a startup, you know, it wasn't something that I could do in that instant. But those early years really taught me to focus on the whole person and to not be distracted by rosary or like, oh, this person's been to this country, they've lived this life, or they're wealthy, so because they're wealthy, this thing won't be too much for them. I actually found that like the people who are the poshest were the hardest to work with because there were certain things that they were unwilling to do that were a big part of the way that we worked. So I had come from this background in Sierra Leone where I had to do everything, right? Like there's no poshness about being a TV host or a TV producer in Sierra Leone. I'd have to clean up the studio myself where we were shooting, picking up garbage. I've had to lift a 5-gallon of fuel for it to help so they can pour it into a generator. I really, when I was in Sierra Leone those 4 years, it was grimy and I had to play all the roles. So by the time I got to Ghana, I understood that and it was a part of the way I worked, but I found that a lot of the people I would hire they were looking for a very cushy They're looking for a very cushy, posh kind of, oh, we're working for the African region. So, okay. I'm like, no, fam. You have to go to Makola because that's where our sales distributors like, the work is not in here. So I really learned to kind of filter people and to focus on values, attitude to work, personality, willingness to learn. And instead of looking for ready-made people, which is really key, instead of looking for ready-made people, look for people who have the potential to grow. And that's really influenced how I find talent now, how I employ people now, and what I focus on in terms of like team building. So yeah, those early years were definitely a learning experience, both as a business person, so as someone running a company, but also as a service provider. Understanding the African market, that a lot of times like these sales and marketing strategies that are in the like textbooks and the blogs, that market that they're talking about it's not this market, right? It's maybe the American market 50 years ago, right? Even if that the textbook strategies and guerrilla marketing and this, all of the ways that you can sell to Africans, how you can generate leads in this market, how you can build a brand in this market, that it's not in a textbook. You know, you really learn by doing. And so those early years for me was a lot of experimentation. Thankfully, my main client they really trusted me. And they believed in actually, I would say, I think they just really valued my integrity. I think that was exactly it. It was that when they gave me money for something, I would account for it. That when I said I was going to go do X, I did X. And so then when I experimented and things didn't go the way that maybe we had envisioned, they knew I ultimately had the company's best interest at heart. They knew that I hadn't cut corners, and they knew that I was trying, right? And so it was ultimately, I feel like, yeah, for 5 years I was there, that it was my integrity that probably kept me there that long and gave me the edge.